Not just what you have to say about the team you cover, but you yourself. So most people, I'm sure you've learned by now, that cover the teams around here generally have some kind of a tie. They are from the state or a nearby state or went to school somewhere or whatever. That is not the story for you. So you cover Ole Miss for the Daily Journal, and you have a pretty unique path to get here. So tell us about that. How did you end up in Mississippi?
Yeah, I've it's funny. I've really kind of been all over the place. I'm from Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area. Lived there 26-ish years, and then decided I was covering high school sports, it was great. It was great to get my feet wet and kind of learn about how to deal with people and all the little nitty gritty interviewing things that you need to get good at this job that you don't necessarily get all that training in school. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to really get where I wanted to get staying in California, and that was to cover college stuff. And just with the kind of the lay of the land, with it's the LA Times and places like that, and they're not going to hire somebody, for the most part, who's been out of school for a year or two. And so I decided to start covering stuff up in the Boise, Idaho area. To cover Boise State, and I remember that blue field growing up, and I remember watching that Fiesta Bowl with with the Statue of Liberty and all that stuff. I was like, oh yeah, that's great. And so I had never been to Idaho in my life. I had never driven in snow. I knew nothing about it, but I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. I was up there for 4 years at two different places. My first job was covering high school and Boise State, and then I just got a Boise State beat. Did some breaking news for a bit, decided it wasn't for me, and wanted to get back into sports. And the next job that came open was in Laramie, Wyoming, another place I had never really been. And if anybody's ever thinking about going on vacation there, I do not recommend running within your first couple of days, because it is 7,000 feet in the air. And it is very, very tough to get acclimated. So I went there in right midway during the 2019 season, and then COVID happened, and that was the Mountain West football got shut down for a bit. I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing in the fall of 2020. Luckily, it came back, and this opportunity came up, and I've always wanted to get to the biggest level of stuff, and the SEC is as good as it gets. I've been watching the SEC games on CBS, those afternoon games with Vern and all that stuff since I was a kid. So when the opportunity came up, I wasn't going to turn it down. And again, Mississippi was a place I had also never been. I think the farthest south I had been was Texas. So the first thing I tell people, the biggest difference between this and California is I have to look at the weather report now. I never had to worry about that in Los Angeles, but now it's going to change probably 5 times a day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what's the old saying? It's if you don't like the weather in Mississippi, just wait an hour, and you'll have something new.
It's incredible. It's like if I'm taking a walk, it might rain twice just because it can, and it's still 90 degrees, but so I don't know if I'm ever going to get used to the humidity and stuff, but it's been great. I love it out here. Great people. They love Ole Miss, and they're passionate, and that's all you can really ask for in this business.
That's awesome. Well, we're glad you're here. And speaking of journeys, your latest story is a fascinating one. It's part of what makes the team you cover so interesting. You wrote about a couple of guys that are on a similar journey to you in terms of geographical distance, I suppose. A couple of guys, friends, roommates that are far from Mississippi that found their way on the same college team. Tell us, without spoiling the entire thing, tell us a little bit about what you wrote today and who you wrote about.
Yeah, so Tysheem Johnson and Aisheem Young are both from Philadelphia, which I wasn't particularly familiar with the geography there. It's a pretty big city. They grew up about 20 minutes apart, one from the north part and one from the south part. But Aisheem's older, and he was sort of, I think as his high school coach told me, he was like the king of Philadelphia. He was just a Pop Warner legend. He won a national championship and all that stuff. And Tysheem actually ended up playing for the same high school coach, and they sort of were always compared growing up, which Sheem was the better one. And then obviously Taishim came here straight out of high school. And Aishim went to Iowa State, entered the portal last year, and he ended up coming here. And he and Taishim are that Philadelphia connection is really strong. They're roommates. My favorite part about the story is that they walk the same now. They sign each other in like for breakfast every day, because if you get one, you're always going to get the other. Just a really cool story about guys that are just from such a far off place compared distance wise to here, that are thriving here, and I think are going to do some really big things this year.
You can't say quarterback. What is the one position group that you are most interested in come Troy game on Saturday, whether it be because they're really good or doubt or whatever? But you can't say quarterback. That's cheating.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's the easy one. I'm gonna say the other easy one, and then I'll say another one. I'll say linebackers, because you look into that depth chart. There's a lot of ors, just in terms of Troy Brown or so and so, and there's talent there. I think Troy Brown's going to be a really good player, and I think Kerry Coleman can be a really good player, and they like Austin Keys when he's been healthy, and Ashanti Sistrunk, but just trying to figure out how that exactly looks in terms of, they got so much from Chance Campbell and Mark Robinson last year, and even Lakia Henry was a guy who had played a lot. They lost just so many tackles from that group, and so how that ends up working out, I think, is going to be really interesting, because the rest of the defense is really, really deep, and we kind of know what it's going to be for the most part. That linebacking group, I think, is going to be interesting. The other one I'm curious is the offensive line, and not because there's like question marks, but because it needs to be a strength of the team. With you've got all of these new pieces on the team in terms of the transfer portal and all that stuff, but other than really one guy, the offensive line is a bunch of people who have been here and have played a lot of games together, and so I think that group really kind of needs to kind of literally pave the way. And, I think this team is going to go as far as its offensive line takes it, because, they're going to want to run the ball. The running backs are great, but when you start to get to those SEC games, it becomes a little bit harder to run the ball. And so, can you hold up against the Alabama defensive line and those big, stout defensive lines? Troy, we'll see. I think it might be interesting for a bit, but I think talent wins out in a game like that. But when you start getting into the meat of the SEC schedule, that offensive line is going to, I think, play a really big role.
Michael Katz of the Daily Journal joins us right now. Got about a minute and a half left. So you mentioned the linebacker spot, and it's the absence of Chance Campbell and Mark Robinson is even more highlighted by them not only making rosters in Tennessee and Pittsburgh, but Mark Robinson is going to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a rookie. Dean Leonard just made a roster. You think that they portaled well and they've got some guys, but man, with the way those two have performed in NFL training camp as rookies, making teams, Chance Campbell is going to play some as well, going to be a valuable piece on special teams. It just puts a massive spotlight on that position group, because they didn't just lose guys. They lost rookies that are going to play for two really good defenses in the NFL. That's a different animal.
Absolutely. And then when you add in, obviously different position group, but, Sam Williams is a second-round pick, and he's been tearing it up for the Cowboys at end. Losing, replacing a guy like that, and you mentioned Dean Leonard. I mean, we always want to talk about the offense with the Lane Kiffin teams, but there were a lot of really talented pieces on that defense, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of, fill it in with these new pieces.
Michael, I appreciate you coming on today. Hopefully we can